An overly involved Blitz game of chess. When peace is such a fragile thing that just one move can start a war, a pawn once guard to the white king rushed to the central square e4. That white piece met its equal there, a single pawn as black as night, leapt forward to e5's dark square to meet the cavalry of white. The bold white knight jumped to f3, his wily eyes the pawn transfix. That rabbit donkey won't scare me. The queen of black moved to f6. A timid pawn along the flank came forth from square h2 to 4. Black's queen moved swift along her rank to square c6, but did no more. A second knight made his debut onto c3 to join the fray. Back to f6, the queen then threw effectively 2 turns away. Next to d5, the knight had leapt, placed well to threaten the black queen, who fast to square d6 had stepped in front of that pale figurine. Then to d4, white's pawn was bound, enjoying queen and knight's defense. Black pawn c6 was the last round before the battle would commence. At square e5, black's pawn was slain in an attack from pawn d4. A pawn of black then killed again. d5's white knight leapt nevermore. d6, cackled the pawn of white. You know the rules, and so do I. For pride and greed you took our knight. For pride and greed your queen shall die. Onto d5, the pawn of black left on e4 no piece alive. But as no pawn gets to move back, white's knight escaped him to e5. Then to c6, a knight most grim cried out, "Face death, or quick be gone!" And white chose death, but not for him, the innocent f7 pawn. The king in black moved from the rear and on f7 made his play to grant that hostile cavalier a royal pardon. In a way. The last white knight had to relent, but his white king refused to yield. Revising strategies, he sent the clergy to the battlefield. The bishop dressed and walked in light, performed his duties in the war, last sacrament for the white knight, and checked the king from square c4. The king stepped to f6 to find that while one bishop he had fled, another followed close behind, who checked him from g5 instead. To face that bishop in his file, the king went on to square g6. His bravery throughout that trial was nothing that a queen can't fix. The queen of white stood on d5, a threat to both black knights and yet, ensuring both her bishops thrive. Not even checked, but still a threat. A brave black knight stood by his lord on square f6, soon to obtain this foreign queen who leapt toward him to f7. Checked again. The king moved to f5 and said, encouraging his favorite pawn, "Just 3 more steps, so go ahead. Godspeed, you are the chosen one." A bold white pawn then checked the king when he left straight onto g4, but it would not do anything. e5, the king was saved once more. To square d1 from left to right moved an unmoving pile of bricks, and yet there stood the rook of white. A pawn stepped forward to b6. The king of white leapt to g1, a double step beyond his range. His rook then passed him to f1, for kingside castling is exchange. Black's pawn raced forward to a5, white's pawn did nearly the same thing. f4 to check, but not survive. He'd scorned the favourite of the king. The black d4 pawn had been passed, in passing later white's mistake. Before he could yell, "Not so fast!" Black's pawn moved to f3 to take. The piece was taken en passant by nothing less than sheer neglect. Ignoring that, white rook e1, and yet again black's king was checked. To square e4, a knight of black had come to his dark king's defense. The queen of white went to the back, checked on e8 without pretense. Like knight, so bishop moved with speed, straight for e7, so devout, to block the queen like the brave steed, except white's pawn then took him out. The chosen pawn then on f2 had forked white's king and rook as well. The king escaped him to h2 while his abandoned tower fell. The board now crossed, black's favourite pawn with savagery like none had seen destroyed the rook on square e1. The chosen was promoted queen. The last white rook fled to d5 away from this new royal shrew. He checked well on this forward drive, but had no chance to see it through. To square e6, the king of black had found himself caged in by white, too busy dodging each attack for king and queen to reunite. Then on f7 yet again, the king was checked by white's fair queen, but unprotected she was slain, by king for lack of guillotine. f5, white's rook moved to the side, so rook and bishop both stood where. They checked the king, then forced to hide back on e8, his starting square. The bishop failed to follow through, no checkmate ends this game and rhyme. No bishop rook, no king thought to raise arms against the hands of time.